Today we're going to be unpacking one of the most uncomfortable scriptures that I believe is in the Bible. Have you ever heard the scripture, as a dog returns to its vomit? Now, when I think about this scripture, if I'm honest, it's quite repulsive. I mean, just the thought alone of eating something that you've already thrown up. I mean, let's just talk about it. The smell, the taste, the image of it, just thinking about it long enough almost makes me makes me nauseous. It's like, why would anybody return to something that their body has already rejected? And yet, as disgusting as this imagery is, this scripture actually gives us incredible insight to human behavior. You see, because if we're honest, a lot of us return to things that God has already shown us aren't good for us. Not only does God identify it as toxic, but he also allowed us to release it from our system. Yet, we just keep going back. We pick it back up, we reattach it to ourselves, and then we ingest it all over again. And if you'll lean in with me for just a few moments, I want to talk about why we return to the very things that make us sick and how to move forward. Because I don't think that most of us go back because that thing was good. I think many times we go back simply because it was familiar to us. And there's a difference between something that nourishes us and something that our spirit has already rejected. So let's lean in. Welcome back. So our focal scripture today is going to be Proverbs 26:11. And the actual scripture reads, it says, as a dog returns to its vomit, so fools return or repeat their folly. So before we begin, we need to identify the difference between the word vomit and the word regurgitation, because it's different. Now, this may sound strange, but vomit and regurgitation are not the same thing. You see, in nature, some animals regurgitate their food. Like, for instance, a mother bird will regurgitate her food to feed their babies because the babies aren't mature enough to digest the solid food on their own. And so what comes back up is actually nourishment for them. It feeds growth, it sustains their life, it serves a purpose. But vomit, on the other hand, is different. See, vomit is what our body actually injects, right? Rejects. It recognizes that this thing is toxic. It can't stay inside of me. It's making me sick. So one is nourishment revisited, while the other one is poison rejected. And I think spiritually, we sometimes confuse the two. You see, there are things in life that we revisit because we still have something to learn from them, like a lesson, a truth, a memory, a foundation. But then there's some things that God has allowed us to come out of, and we keep going back, and that thing is damaging us. And if we're not careful, we'll return to what's making us sick and convince ourselves that is actually feeding us. So here's what I've discovered, right? I've discovered that most people don't really wake up and one day say, you know what? I really like to make my life a little bit harder today, right? Nobody signs up for heartbreak. Nobody volunteers to be disappointed, right? No, nobody is intentionally choosing another unhealthy cycle. Yet somehow we still find ourselves right back in the same familiar places, having the same familiar conversations, fighting the same familiar battles, and carrying the same familiar baggage. And if we're honest, sometimes we know exactly where this road is going to lead to before we even take the first step, and yet we keep stepping, right? So why do we do it? I don't think it's because we're stupid. Some people say just because you're stupid. I don't think it's because we're stupid. I think it's because, I think it's because we're human. Not because we're weak, but because we're human. Not because we don't know any better, but because we're human. And as human beings, we have a tendency to confuse what's familiar with what's safe. And that's important for us to understand because, see, familiar and safe aren't the same thing, just like vomit and regurgitation. Is it the same thing? So let's give you an example. Like, let's take your favorite chair. Like, this chair could be broken, beat up, ripped, right? You may have sat in it for years. It's uncomfortable, it's unstable, and sometimes it hurts your back. And if not your chair, think of your grandparents' chair, right? But it's their chair, it's your chair, and you know exactly how it leans. You know exactly where it's broken. And then someone offers you a better chair, right? A stronger chair, a healthier chair, a chair that doesn't lean. And yet, for some reason, you or that person keeps sitting in the same old chair. Not because the chair is better, but because the chair is familiar. And I think that that's how many of us end up doing the same thing over and over with our relationships, with our habits, with our thought patterns, and even how we view ourselves. See, you are not alone if this is you, right? Maybe your vomit isn't drugs. Maybe your vomit isn't alcohol. Maybe it isn't even something that people would label as a major issue. Maybe it's something that you say is simple, like self-doubt or insecurity or constantly talking yourself out of an opportunity, right? Or maybe it can be something like believing you'll never be enough because that's what you've always been told, or replaying old failures over and over again every time you're presented with a new opportunity. Or maybe it's just returning to a version of yourself that you've already outgrown. See, I don't want you to be overly hard on yourself because everybody has something that they keep revisiting. See, and in the book of Exodus, the Egypt that the Israelites remember wasn't the Egypt that they left. See, this isn't just a modern problem, it's an ancient human problem. See, one of the most fascinating stories in the Bible is the story of Israel leaving Egypt. See, I call it fascinating because God delivers them from slavery. God parts the Red Sea in doing it. He breaks their chains. He sets them free. But what amazes me is what happens after all of these miracles take place. See, after God brings them out, they just keep talking about going back. And every time I would read this, I would want to ask, back to what? What is it that you're trying to go back to? Back to slavery? Back to being oppressed? I don't know, back to bondage? Just back to being controlled. What exactly were they missing? And what exactly are you missing when you go back? But see, the older me understands that because Egypt, they remember the Egypt that's in their mind, not the Egypt that they left. See, they remember the Egypt of comfort, but not the Egypt of change. The Egypt of predictability, but they forgot the Egypt of pain. See, they remember what was familiar to them, but they forgot what it cost them. And isn't that exactly what we do? Yeah, we romanticize what hurts us. See, we look back and we rarely look back and are honest about what it is we see. See, we edit, we romanticize, and we create highlight reels, right? And we'll look at a relationship and we'll say, that relationship wasn't all bad. That habit wasn't helping. That season wasn't healthy, but somehow we remember the comfort and we forget the consequences. See, we remember the relief, but we forget the damage. We remember the familiarity, but we forget the actual bondage. And suddenly our Egypt starts looking better than it actually was. Here's what I think. I think Israel teaches us that sometimes people can leave a place physically without leaving it mentally. See, the Israelites, their bodies left Egypt, but Egypt hadn't left their way of thinking. And many of us know exactly what that feels like. See, you've left the relationship, but the relationship, it hasn't really left you. You left the environment that you were in, but the environment, it hasn't left your mindset. You've left the bad habit, but the habit still occupies space in your thought process. You've moved on externally, but internally, you're still negotiating with something you were supposed to leave behind. And here's why I think we often miss it. Most of us, we don't miss the thing. We miss what the thing gave us. We don't miss the toxic relationship. We miss feeling wanted. We don't miss the unhealthy habit. We miss the temporary pleasure or escape that it gave us. And the dysfunction, we don't miss that either, but we miss the certainty that we got out of it. See, we don't miss Egypt. We miss what Egypt represented. And until we identify the need underneath the behavior, we'll keep returning to the substitutes. So here are 3 suggestions that I have to help you if this is you. So grab a pen, piece of paper, and just write this down. So number 1, I want you to ask better questions. Instead of asking, why do I keep going back? I want you to ask things like, what am I hoping to get when I get back or when I go back? What's the comfort that I'm looking for? What's the validation that I need? What's the relief? What need am I trying to meet by going back? Because sometimes the behavior isn't the real problem. The unmet need is. And then number two, I want you to start measuring your progress by your awareness. So stop measuring growth by perfection. Measure it by awareness. See, years ago, you repeated the same patterns unconsciously, right? You just did them. But now you recognize them. And that's growth. Years ago, you might have justified what you did, but now you question your behavior. That's growth. Before, you would have just stayed right there in that position, but now you're fighting your way out. And that's growth. See, don't overlook process because you're not at the finish line. And then number 3, I want you to replace condemnation and curiosity. So instead of asking, what's wrong with me, right? Begin asking yourself, what is this pattern trying to teach me? What am I learning from it? See, shame keeps people stuck, but awareness helps you to grow. And we want you to grow. We want you to realize that healing is an appetite for change. And this is where everything comes together. See, the real battle isn't always around us. The real battle is what we've developed an appetite for. Because if Egypt is still feeding your cravings, you'll keep looking backwards even when God is leading you forward. See, that's why healing isn't just about changing your environment. It's about changing your appetite. See, anybody can throw something up, right? Anybody can do that. But transformation is when you stop calling what you've thrown up food. See, that's maturity. That's growth. That's the freedom that you're looking for. So when what once conformed you no longer appeals to you, and you're no longer attracted to it and allowing you to control it, and you're no longer defined by or allowing it to own you, then that's healing. So maybe the question isn't, why did I go back? Maybe the real question you should be asking is, why does this still feel like comfort to me? Because until your appetite changes, you'll always continue mistaking poison for provision. And maybe that's the lesson hidden inside this uncomfortable scripture. Not that we're hopeless, not that we're doomed to repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again forever, but that growth begins when we stop calling poison nourishment. And healing begins when we stop romanticizing what made us sick and what was toxic. Because some things are meant to nourish us, and some things were expelled because they were destroying us. See, I want you to learn the difference. And I want you to remember this. I want you to remember that the Egypt we remember is often not the Egypt we left. We remember the comfort and we forget the chains. And healing is not just what comes out of us. Healing is losing the appetite for what poisoned us in the first place. See, this is Faith and Focus. And until next time, I want you to keep your faith in focus and your future moving forward. So subscribe, share, and most importantly, be blessed.